Now, Rosie, I'm going to make a classic English dish. It's one of those dishes you would have in a school. If you have lunchtime, you'd have a big tray of this. Basically, it's sausages cooked already in a tray, and then you pour a Yorkshire pudding mixture into it. Really easy to do. Now, it's a simple recipe, and if you remember these things, it's basically the same quantity of eggs, flour, and milk mixed together. Now, I know that 6 eggs comes about a cup, so I'll crack these straight into my bowl here. And Rosie, I'm going to get you to measure up a cup of the self-raising flour there.
You got it.
Now, whisking up the eggs, and I stuck a bit of cayenne pepper in there as well to give it a bit of kick. Now, what we're going to do is pour in the milk and a little bit of flour at the same time so they bind together nicely. There we go, a little bit of milk in there. Put in half of that flour. All right. There we go. And we'll make sure we mix it around so there's not a lot of lumps, but we hit it with a whisk and all the lumps will come out of it. There we go. Now we're mixing it all together. Now this has a really unusual name, and I don't know where the name comes from. It's toad in the hole. You know, so I call it Yorkshire pudding with sausages, but you know the English call it toad in a hole, and there's no reason I know for.
They're strange folk, aren't they? I think it was what it kind of looked like at the beginning when you did it, but could have been mistaken for a little toad hiding away.
There we go. Now throw the spring onions into here, Rosie, and what we're going to do is I've got the sausages already in the oven. Now put this aside over here, and I'll reach over to the oven and grab the sausages out, and you can see the pan's nice and hot.
Oh, they're good ones, aren't
That's really important. It's nice and hot. It's bubbling away. The sausages have been in there for about 10 to 15 minutes. They're cooked all the way through. Some onion in there, some garlic in there, and a little bit of olive oil. If you want, you can prick the sausages so the fat comes out of it, but that's up to you. Now, what I do, Rose, is pour this over the top and make sure that tray is nice and hot. Pour it in over the top like that, and then give it a bit of a shake to make sure all the bits and pieces are out.
Because you want that oil to be hot as soon as it, don't you? You want it to be hot, and it starts raising already.
Oh, there we go. You know exactly what's going on. Now, I'm going to pop this straight into the oven, and then we're going to make probably the most important thing that goes with it, an onion gravy. Into the oven we go. Now, Rosie, I'm going to make an onion gravy to go with the toad in the hole, and it's going to be delicious. Now, the most important thing is we start with some bone broth. If you can take the top off that one.
The good stuff, we want grass-fed, free-range. That's what we always want.
There we go. And a good tip, if a broth or a stock is gelatinous, which this one is, it's a good sign. It means it's got lots of gelatin in it, and it's going to be nice and flavoursome. Now, I've already got a couple of packets in there already, and what I've done is brought it up to the boil. It's a lot easier if the stock that you're using is nice and hot. It holds everything together. Now, I'm going to make the onion gravy, and what I've got in my pan here already, you can see this, Rosie. I've got 3 onions that I've sliced nice and thin. Now, caramelise them in a little bit of olive oil, and that's what gets them nice and golden.
It's amazing that the longer and longer you cook the onion, that sweetness, that natural sweetness starts coming out. It's divine.
Exactly. You can smell it, can't you? Now, to that, I'm going to add some butter. About 100 grams of soft butter there. There's a lot of butter there. That's what's going to hold the whole sauce together. Now, what I'll do is stir the onions around, and I'll turn the heat up because I want that butter to melt. So then I'll add the flour, and that's what will bring it all together. Now, you can see the bone broth is nice and dark, and that's a good sign. If it's nice and dark, it's going to have a nice, rich flavour. Now,
got a little bit of apple cider vinegar in that one, I think.
You could, and apple cider also gives you a bit of acid as well, which gives it a lovely flavour. Now, my butter's melted, and this is what we're making a roux. So I get a little bit of flour, and I've got some plain flour here. I'm going to add the flour to the onions so that they come together and bind up beautifully and make a nice thick sauce. Now, the rule of thumb is you add about the same amount of flour to the amount of butter or oil that you've got in there. Now, you've just got to stir that around like this for a minute or so on a decent heat, and you'll see it comes together like a lovely paste. And if I stir that around for a little bit, I'll get a nice dark colour, which is what I'm aiming for. If I've got a dark roux, which is what I'm making, I'll get a really nice dark sauce.
You've got to be diligent. There's no going to have a cup of tea with this dish, is there?
Yes.
You've chosen a toughie with the Yorkshire puddings and the gravy. You've got to be on there, taskmaster.
Exactly. And I've got just enough time to make this because the toad in the hole takes about 20 minutes to cook. Now, Rosie, you can see the roux starting to get really good colour, and this is what I want. I'll move the stock over here, and you've got a ladle in front of you. I want you to ladle the stock in here, and it's a great idea to get someone to give you a hand with it because it's nice and easy.
Fast and smart.
Exactly. So ladle some in there. What you do with a sauce like this, you ladle a little bit of the bone broth in there and stir it around. And if you do it a little bit at a time, you won't get any lumps. There we go. Stir it around. You're getting a great colour out of that, and you can see how thick it is. Beautiful. Throw some more in there. And the beauty of doing it this way is you can keep adding liquid until you get the right consistency. If you want it nice and thick, you just add a little bit of liquid. If you want it nice and thin, you add a lot of liquid.
I can actually smell that little bit of apple cider vinegar that's within that broth.
It's fantastic,
so,
isn't it?
It's really good, yeah.
There we go, stir that in like that. And what I'll do is I'll stir the last little bit, throw it all in, Rosie.
Oh, we go.
And it's going to be nice, thick gravy. We'll let this stir and simmer away for a few more minutes till it's cooked all the way through. And then what I'll do, this is a little pro tip, Rosie. I've got some of this thick caramel cooking sauce. If you want it a little bit darker, you could always put a tablespoon of this in, stir it into it, and you get a nice dark sauce. Have a look at this.
Tricks and tips.
As I turn that around, look at that.
For them.
Dark sauce, beautiful, isn't it? All we have to do is wait for the sausages to cook. Now, Rosie, the toad in the hole's ready. You can see it's puffed up nicely.
Looks great.
Got a little bit gold on the outside. Yeah. Now, the spring onions are a little twist. That's what I like to put in there. And I'll just pick that up like that.
I'm annoyed that I didn't smuggle 2 veggie sausages down the bottom there.
We could have done that, couldn't we? Now, it's all about the gravy in my book because you've got a big, spongy Yorkshire pudding.
Got some of that skin on the top as well. People love that.
Exactly. If you let it sit there for long enough, it comes out. Now, this is the fun part.
Have a little taste.
Cutting into the middle of it, and you make sure you get plenty of that onion gravy, nice and dark, flavoursome, steaming.
Yeah.
It's going to be filling, nice and simple, and very cheap to make.
It's pure comfort food, and you can use that gravy on your Sunday roast dinner as well, so you could use that on a bunch of different things, but how is it?
It's moments like this, Rosie, when I'm glad you're a vegetarian.